My name is Kendra Hale. I'm 35, and on paper, I look fine. Good job, nice suit, a calendar full of flights and client dinners. But that Sunday, in my parents' warm kitchen, I felt 12 again. The old HVAC hummed. The roast chickens smelled like butter and pepper. My dad set his glass down like he was closing a meeting. "Everything goes to Logan," he said. My mum nodded, already reaching for the tissues. My brother didn't even try to hide his smile. Then Dad added, "Softer. You'll get the family business." My chest went hollow. They believed they were closing the door. They didn't realize they were opening something else. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from. If you've ever stayed quiet to keep the family calm, even when it cost you, stay with me. When I was 12, my dad said he hurt his back at work. He came home early, moving stiff, talking slow. The TV stayed on all day, low volume, news looping. My mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. The light above the sink flickered like it always did. She said, "We're going to need you to help out more now." She didn't ask. She didn't explain. She just said it like a fact. My brother Logan was 8. He was still allowed to be loud, still allowed to forget his backpack, still allowed to be a kid. I became the quiet one, the one who noticed the mail piling up, the one who learned where the circuit breaker was, the one who watched my mum's face before asking for anything. By 16, I had a job at a grocery store after school. I stocked shelves. I worked weekends. On my first payday, I brought the check home and laid it on the kitchen table. My mum hugged me tight. My dad smiled and said he was proud. That hug felt warm, necessary. I remember thinking, this is what being loved feels like. The next paycheck, I handed it over again. The hug came back. The third time, it felt normal. The fourth time, expected. What I didn't notice then was when the hug stopped happening on any other day. Summers were backyard barbecues with paper plates and cheap beer. Relatives crowded around the grill. Logan was always the star. "That kid's got something," my uncle would say. "You can tell." I stood at the grill flipping burgers, grease popping on my arms, smiling like it didn't matter. Someone would pat my shoulder and say, "Ken's the responsible one." It sounded like praise. It wasn't. Christmas mornings were loud for Logan. Boxes, electronics, things with cords. For me, there was usually an envelope, sometimes cash, sometimes a note. "We put this toward the electric bill." My mum would say it softly, like she was doing me a favor. I learned not to look disappointed. Disappointment made her defensive. Defensive turned into lectures about sacrifice. At my high school graduation, I was valedictorian. My name echoed in the gym. I looked up into the bleachers and saw my parents smiling, but their camera was pointed at Logan. He was waving. "Later," my dad said. "You're smart. You'll figure it out." It was the same sentence he used every time he didn't want to help. When I was 19, I got into an out-of-state college. Partial scholarship. I just needed my parents to sign the financial aid paperwork. I spread the forms out on the dining table. My mom didn't even sit down. She said, "We need you here." My dad nodded. Family comes first. I folded the papers back into the envelope. I told myself it was temporary. 4 years later, Logan got into the same school. They signed his papers that night. They took out loans for him. I helped him pack. By my 20s, sending money home was routine. The amount crept up. There was always a reason. Just until we catch up. We never did. Mail started disappearing from the counter. My mum closed her laptop fast when I walked by. A drawer in their bedroom stayed locked. I met Sammy around that time. She listened. She noticed patterns I had learned not to name. One night, she said, "This isn't normal." I laughed it off. In my family, naming the problem was worse than the problem itself. I didn't know it then, but all of this was already being written down somewhere. Not in a journal, in paperwork, in signatures that weren't mine, in plans that didn't include me at all. By the time I hit my late 20s, My life looked stable from the outside. I had climbed my way into a regional role. Airports felt like second homes. Hotel rooms blurred together. I wore blazers and learned how to talk numbers without sounding cold. Every month, I send money to my parents without missing a date. It was as automatic as rent, as predictable as gravity. The payments were never framed as demands. They were framed as needed. The water heater, the roof, the back pain, the insurance gap. My mum always sounded tired on the phone. My dad always sounded embarrassed, which somehow made it worse. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself this was what grown daughters did. Logan, meanwhile, was busy. That was the word everyone used. Busy. He showed up for the holidays. He brought his laundry. He left early. When he needed money. He called me, not our parents. "Can you spot me?" he'd say. "I'll pay you back." He never did. No one ever mentioned it. There were moments that felt off, but I learned to ignore them. A letter from a bank addressed to me that my mum said was junk mail. A voicemail from an attorney she said was a mistake. A locked drawer that hadn't been locked before. Each time I asked, I got the same response. "Why are you making this into something?" Then came the promises, casual, vague. "One day, this will all be yours." My dad would gesture around the house like he was talking about a legacy. Not a liability. "You'll be taken care of." I didn't need details. Details felt greedy. I just needed to believe there was an end point. When I turned 32, I tried to draw a boundary. Sammy and I wanted to get married. We wanted to start saving for a future that didn't involve emergency calls. I asked to reduce what I sent each month. Just a little. My mum went quiet. My dad's voice hardened. After everything we've done, that was the first time I felt real fear, not losing them, of what they might do. After that, the tension never really went away. Calls felt monitored. Conversations felt rehearsed. I started noticing how often my name came up in their stories to other people. How I was always framed as dramatic, emotional, sensitive. It was subtle, but it stuck. Sammy saw it clearly. She started keeping notes, dates, amounts, screenshots. I told her she was overreacting. She told me she hoped she was wrong. There was one night I couldn't sleep. I was visiting my parents, stretched out on the couch, the house quiet except for the hum of the HVAC. I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. Low voices, tense. My dad said something about the trust. My mum said, "Just don't mess it up." I didn't know what they meant. I didn't ask. I went back to sleep. I thought the story of my family was simple. My parents struggled. My daughter stepped up. My son was loved. I believed that was the whole picture. I believed the sacrifices would balance out in the end. I didn't understand that balance was never part of the plan. By the time my mum mentioned updating the will, after her mild stroke, I felt relief instead of suspicion. I thought the worst was behind us. I thought the years of silence and swallowing things had finally earned me peace. I didn't know the paperwork was already done. I didn't know my role had already been decided. And I didn't know that the girl who learned to be responsible at 12 had been paying for a future that was never meant to be hers. When I finally asked to reduce what I sent each month, I rehearsed the conversation in my head for days. I kept my voice steady. I chose my words carefully. I told them Sammy and I were planning our wedding. I said we needed to start saving. I asked to lower the amount from $3,500 to $2,000. I didn't say forever. I said temporarily. The silence on the line stretched too long. My mum spoke first. Her voice went thin. "After everything we've sacrificed for you," my dad didn't raise his voice. That was worse. "You're being selfish," he said. "You make good money. We're barely getting by. I apologized. I shouldn't have, but I did." The call ended without a decision. I felt sick, but I told myself it would blow over. It didn't. 2 days later, my boss asked me to step into a conference room. HR was already there. The blinds were half closed. The air felt cold. They told me they'd received a call from my mother. She said I was having a mental breakdown. that I was stealing from my elderly parents, that she was worried about the company's reputation. I stared at the table. I couldn't find my voice. HR asked if there was anything I wanted to explain. I pulled up my bank app with shaking hands. I scrolled. Month after month. Transfers out. Same amounts. Same dates. I turned the screen toward them. No one apologized. They just nodded and said they needed to document everything. I walked out of that room feeling smaller than I had in years. After that, every call from my parents felt loaded. When Sammy needed surgery the following year, I didn't even ask to reduce the payment. I asked to skip 1 month. Just one. My dad laughed. My mum cried. She said she didn't know how they'd survive. The next thing I knew, they were standing in the lobby of my office. They were loud. My mum was sobbing. My dad was yelling about ungrateful children. Security showed up. People stared. One of my biggest clients was there that day. He watched the whole thing. By the end of the week, he pulled his account. I lost a $50,000 commission. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, my back against the couch, and stared at the wall. Sammy sat beside me and didn't say, "I told you so." She just handed me water and let me breathe. A month later, my mum had a mild stroke. She recovered quickly, but the phone calls changed. They talked about time, about making sure things were handled. Then came the promise. "We're updating the will," my dad said. "We want to make things fair." I clung to that sentence longer than I should have. Sunday dinner was quiet when we arrived. Logan was there, which should have warned me. He only showed up when money was involved. My parents looked happy, glowing, even. My dad cleared his throat. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. "Everything goes to Logan." My ears rang. My mum nodded like this was generous. Logan stared at the table, then smirked. Then my dad looked at me and added, "You'll get the family business." The auto shop had been closed for 5 years. I knew that. What I didn't know yet was the debt, the liens, the environmental violations. I just knew it wasn't an inheritance. It was a trap. Logan finally looked up. "You're good with money," he said. "You'll figure it out." That was the moment something inside me went very still. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out while my dad yelled about gratitude and loyalty. In the car, Sammy unlocked her phone and turned the screen toward me. A spreadsheet filled the display. 15 years, dates, amounts, totals. $412,000. "I've been keeping track," she said quietly. I hoped I'd never need it. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa, my parents' paralegal friend. "Don't sign anything. The shop has liens. Call me now." That was the first time I understood the will wasn't the weapon. It was the excuse. I didn't sleep that night. Sammy sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Numbers glowing against the dark. I paced, every time I stopped. Another memory clicked into place. Another moment that hadn't made sense before suddenly did. Melissa met us the next morning in her small office downtown. File boxes lined the walls. The blinds were bent. She didn't waste time. She slid a thick folder across the desk. "Your grandmother set up a trust for you when you were born," she said. "It was supposed to unlock when you turned 25. My mouth went dry. I had never heard about any trust. Melissa opened the folder. Original documents, my grandmother's signature. I recognized the handwriting from birthday cards she used to mail me with $5 bills tucked inside. Then Melissa flipped to the next section. Withdrawal records, dozens of them. Every year, every withdrawal had my name on it. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, too close. Someone had practiced. The total amount taken was just over $200,000. Melissa showed me where the money went. Straight into my parents' account. I felt sick. Not surprised, sick. I hired a forensic accountant that afternoon. His name was Arthur Blake. He spoke calmly, methodically, like he'd seen this before. He asked for everything. bank statements, tax returns, credit reports. I gave him access and tried not to think about what he might find. 2 weeks later, he called me back. They had opened credit cards in my name when I was 16. Maxed them out, never paid them. That explained why my credit had always been terrible. Why nothing ever went through without a cosigner. I had blamed myself for years. There was more. The house my parents lived in wasn't in their name. It was mine. They had used trust money to buy it and forged my signature on the paperwork, according to the county records. I owned it outright. I laughed when Arthur told me. A short, ugly laugh. I had been paying rent on a house I already owned. Arthur kept digging. He found disability payments my dad collected while working under the table. He found tax filings where my parents claimed me as a dependent long after I'd moved out. He found utility accounts and payday loans opened with my social security number. The report grew thicker by the day. I took everything to the police. Detective Nina Ortiz didn't sugarcoat it. She said family cases were messy. She said people lied better when they were related. But she also said the evidence was overwhelming. She warned me things might escalate. They did. Logan showed up at my apartment 3 days later. He banged on the door until the hallway echoed. He pushed past me and started talking fast. Mum and Dad were panicking. The police had called. He demanded to know what I'd done. I told him I was getting back what was mine. He laughed at first. Then he saw the forensic report on the coffee table. His face went white as he read. He asked if I was really going to send our parents to jail. I said they'd sent themselves. When he left, his hands were shaking. That night, my mum posted on Facebook a long story about an ungrateful daughter, about sacrifice, about abandonment. Relatives started calling. I didn't answer. 2 days later, my boss called me into his office again. My parents had contacted him. This time, they said I was off my medication. I'd never been on medication in my life. My boss listened, but I could hear the doubt. That same week, all 4 of my tires were slashed. The garage camera hadn't recorded anything. Arthur called the next morning with one more finding. My parents had life insurance policies on me. Several of them. Premiums paid with trust money. That's when fear replaced anger. When Detective Ortiz called to say the handwriting expert confirmed the signatures were forged, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. I wasn't overreacting. I was late. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning. My parents' lawyer's office smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. The air conditioning was too cold. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to feel personal. My mom sat closest to the tissue box. My dad leaned back like he owned the place. Logan took the chair across from me, legs spread, already annoyed. Their lawyer, Clyde Harrison, cleared his throat and started talking about family resolutions and moving forward. He used words like misunderstanding and stress. I let him talk. I had learned that silence made people careless. When he finally paused, I slid a folder across the table. It made a soft sound when it stopped. Paper on wood. "I'm not accepting the auto shop," I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady. Flat. "I've already notified the creditors." My mum's head snapped up. "So, you can't do that," she said. "That's your inheritance. It's a closed business with liens." I said, environmental violations, back taxes. "It's not an inheritance. It's debt." Logan scoffed. "You're good with money," he said. "You'll turn it around." I looked at him. "Your inheritance." I said, "Your problem." My dad's face went red. He leaned forward. "After everything we did for you," he said, "you owe us." I opened the folder again. "Here's a cease and desist from my attorney." I said, "Effective immediately. No more contact at my workplace. No more calls to my employer. No more demands for money." My mom started crying. Real tears this time. "How are we supposed to survive?" she asked. "We're old. We're sick. The bank is closed permanently." I said. I didn't raise my voice. "And so is my account." Clyde tried to interrupt. "Let's slow down," he said. "We can negotiate." I slid another document forward. This is the forensic accounting report. I said, credit fraud, identity theft, forged signatures, disability fraud, tax fraud. Logan stopped fidgeting. And this, I added, is a summary of withdrawals from a trust I didn't know existed. A trust my grandmother set up for me. A trust that was emptied without my consent. My mum looked at the papers like they were in another language. We did what we had to do, she said. It was for the family. You used my name. I said, you used my life. My dad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You'll destroy us, he said. We'll call your job again. We'll tell everyone, try it. I said, I have lawyers this time. The room went quiet. Even the clock seemed to pause. I stood up and put my coat on. No one stopped me. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed. A text from Detective Nina Ortiz. We're ready. I walked out without looking back. They were arrested that afternoon. Federal charges, fraud, identity theft, forgery. The list was longer than I expected. Logan called me from the parking lot, shouting into my voicemail, asking how I could do this. I didn't respond. That night, I sat on my couch with Sammy. The city humming outside the windows. I felt empty, not relieved, not victorious, just finished. They thought the will was the end of the story. For me, it was the moment I stopped protecting them and started protecting myself. I didn't celebrate. There was no moment where I felt triumphant or light. The days after the arrest were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. My phone stayed face down. I stopped checking the locks twice, then 3 times. I slept, but not deeply. Sammy and I changed our routines. Different routes to work, different grocery stores. We installed new locks and a doorbell camera. It wasn't paranoia. It was planned. Detective Ortiz had warned me. When control slips, people reach. The call started anyway. My parents' lawyer tried to negotiate. First, they admitted to taking $50,000, then $100,000. Each offer came with conditions. Drop the charges, resume monthly payments, pretend this never happened. I said no, every time. Logan showed up once, pounding on my door late at night. I watched him through the camera. He looked smaller, desperate. I didn't open it. He left a voicemail blaming me for everything. I saved it. Arthur called with updates, new accounts, old debts, more forged signatures, a pattern that stretched back years. This is bigger than you, he said. I knew. That was the point. Detective Ortiz checked in regularly. The handwriting expert's report was final. The life insurance policies were flagged. Threats were documented. She told me to keep everything. Messages, letters. Silence can be evidence. 2. I went back to the house once, during the day, just to stand in the driveway. The place looked the same. White siding, neat lawn. It felt like visiting a set after the actors had gone home. I didn't go inside. At night, when things slowed, I opened the folder Sammy had built. Dates, numbers, recordings, proof. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. They thought paper could erase me. Paper is exactly how I'm going to finish this. The first morning after everything settled, I sat alone at the kitchen table. No calls, no meetings, just a cup of coffee going cold. My shoulders hurt like I'd been carrying something heavy for years and only just put it down. Winning didn't feel like relief. It felt like silence after a storm, the kind that makes you listen for damage. A week later, I went back to the house. Midday, quiet street. The HVAC hummed the same way it always had. I unlocked the door and stood there, unsure where to put my bag. The rooms felt smaller, like they'd shrunk without the noise. Legally, it was mine. Emotionally, I felt like a guest who stayed too long. I walked into the garage. The smell of oil and dust hung in the air. On a shelf, behind old paint cans, I found a small envelope. My grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a birthday card she'd written years ago. No money. Just a line in blue ink. Be good to yourself. You matter. I sat on the concrete floor and read it twice. She had protected the memory, She just hadn't protected me when it counted. My aunt called that night. She apologized, but it came out sideways. We didn't know how bad it was. She said, I thanked her and didn't promise anything. Forgiveness, if it came, would come later. Boundaries came first. Healing didn't look dramatic. It looked practical. I changed the locks. I closed old accounts. I opened one new drawer and emptied it. I had dinner with friends who knew nothing about my parents. I kept one space exactly as it was and let the rest go. There were moments of regret. I won't pretend there weren't. I would trade the house, the money, all of it, for one moment when my parents chose me while they were alive. But I don't get to rewrite their choices. I only get to decide what I accept now. Sammy and I scheduled our first IVF appointment. I showed up early. I filled out the forms carefully. It felt like taking control in inches, not miles. A letter arrived a few days later. Prison return address. My mum's handwriting. I didn't open it. I set it in a folder and labeled it with the date. Evidence. Not an invitation. That night. As I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed. A missed call from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemail. I set the phone down and went to bed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was paying attention. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit subscribe. This story isn't really about money. It's about what people show you when they think you can't fight back. Share this with someone who got hurt by family decisions. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were me. I read every story. Some of them deserve to be told.